I don't know what I expected that day. Maybe I thought Sarah would be calm when she told me. Maybe I thought I'd see the concern on her face, or a shred of the affection we used to have. But no, she was cold. Too cold. Her voice came through the phone like ice, each word cutting sharper than the last. I want a divorce. I froze. The words barely registered. My mind, as if in self-defense, refused to process it, kept looping back to one thing. Why? She went on without pause. You can talk to my lawyer. I don't want to talk to you anymore. Only him. Then she hung up. The click of the phone was louder than any argument we'd ever had. The silence that followed felt suffocating, as if the entire room closed in around me. I didn't know what to do, what to feel. I stood there, just holding the phone, unable to understand how my life had just crumbled into pieces in a single moment. I tried calling back. No answer. I texted, hoping she'd reply, hoping to get some kind of explanation, anything. But there was nothing. I sat down at the kitchen table, running my hands over my face. How had we gone from laughing over breakfast just a week ago to this? What happened to us? I had no answers, just this cold feeling of disbelief. And the question, the one that now burned through me. Why was she cutting me off like this? Was there someone else? Had I done something wrong? The uncertainty was choking me. It wasn't long before I made up my mind. I had to see her lawyer. I didn't know what I was walking into, but I had no choice. If Sarah wasn't going to talk to me, I would go to the person who could give me some answers. The next morning, I went to Mr. Grayson's office. He was a well-established lawyer, known for handling divorce cases. I had never met him in person before, but I had heard of him. He was the kind of guy who handled high-profile cases, someone you didn't mess with. So when I walked into his office, I felt the weight of the situation sink in. The receptionist, a woman in her 30s with sharp features and cold eyes, looked up as I entered. I could feel the tension in the air. She didn't say a word, just nodded and gestured to the door behind her. Mr. Grayson was waiting for me. No small talk, no pleasantries, just waiting. I walked into the room, my footsteps echoing as I approached the desk. And that's when it happened. The moment everything changed. Mr. Grayson looked up from his paperwork, his usual composed demeanor faltering for a split second. His eyes widened just slightly, the kind of wide-eyed surprise someone tries to hide but fails to completely mask. His fingers twitched, as if he had just touched something hot. But it wasn't until I said the words, "Yes, I'm Sarah's husband," that his whole body seemed to react. He literally jerked back in his chair, his hands trembling, his face paling as though he had seen a ghost. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to make of it. He was staring at me now, his eyes fixed, unblinking. His breathing was uneven, like he was trying to catch his breath after a race. There was something off about it, something that didn't make sense. He was a professional, a lawyer who had dealt with difficult clients, who had seen the worst of human nature. So why was he reacting this way? It didn't make sense. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. The only sound was the hum of the fluorescent lights above us, the kind of quiet that feels unnaturally loud. His lips parted slightly, as if he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. "Mr. Grayson?" I said, my voice cracking, desperate to break the tension. "What's going on?" He swallowed hard. And then, in a voice that barely rose above a whisper, he said, I wasn't expecting this. Not today. I didn't. I thought it was someone else." His hands shook as he adjusted his glasses, but it wasn't just the shaking that caught my attention. It was the way his eyes darted around the room, as though he couldn't focus on one thing for too long. He was panicking over something I wasn't privy to. I leaned in, frustration mounting. "What do you mean? Is something going on with Sarah? Tell me what's happening." Mr. Grayson's lips pressed into a thin line. He looked down, then back at me. The lines of his face hardened, and his gaze shifted nervously. I could see him battling with himself, like he didn't know whether to tell me the truth or to lie and protect whatever secret was gnawing at him. I can't speak freely, Mr. Hall," he said after a long pause. "Not about that. All I can tell you is that I'm just the messenger." The way he said it, the coldness in his voice, it sent a chill up my spine. My instincts screamed at me, telling me to push harder, to demand the answers that were rightfully mine. But I hesitated. There was something in his reaction that made me think I wasn't ready for what I might hear next. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. Something wasn't right, but I didn't know what it was yet. I stepped away from the lawyer's desk, my mind reeling from the strange exchange, the tension hanging heavy in the air. The office felt smaller now, claustrophobic, as if I had just walked into a room that held secrets too dangerous to uncover. I tried to piece together what had just happened, but the puzzle was incomplete. So, I did the only thing I could, took a moment to breathe and reflect. The drive back home was long and unyielding, the silence inside my car overwhelming. I could hear nothing except the hum of the engine, and even that felt far too loud. The streets passed by in a blur, the scenery outside merging together as my thoughts spiraled back in time, back to when everything felt right. Before the chaos, before the lies. I could almost see it now, the way things used to be between Sarah and me. We weren't just a couple. We were partners, in every sense of the word. We had our flaws, sure. I wasn't always the perfect husband, but neither was she the perfect wife. It didn't matter, though, because we made it work. We had to. We were in this together. I remembered the first time we met. It was at a mutual friend's housewarming party. The night had started like any other, with small talk and awkward conversations over cheap wine and finger food. But then, she walked in. Sarah, with her dark curls falling over her shoulder and that warm, inviting smile. There was something about her, a kind of energy that pulled me in, made me feel like I could be myself without any reservations. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing, and by the end of the night, we exchanged numbers, promising to meet again. It felt like the beginning of something special. We moved in together after just a few months. Looking back, maybe it was too fast, but we were young and in love, and every moment felt like it had been perfectly planned by fate. We settled into a small apartment, one that felt just big enough for the two of us. I worked long hours, chasing promotions and career goals, while Sarah kept the apartment warm and bright, decorating it with her own unique sense of style. The little touches she added, candles, fresh flowers, and soft throws, made the space feel like a home, our home. But as the years passed, things slowly shifted. The small moments that once made us laugh, like Sarah trying to make her famous pancakes on Sunday mornings, began to feel less frequent. The late-night conversations over coffee, the shared dreams of growing old together, those two, became rarer. It wasn't that we stopped loving each other. It was more subtle than that. We just drifted. I could tell that Sarah was unhappy. I saw it in the way she would stare out the window, her thoughts far away, her smile less frequent. I asked her about it, of course, more than once. But she always brushed it off, saying she was just tired or stressed about work. It didn't take long for me to stop asking, figuring it was just another one of those passing phases. I told myself it would get better, that we'd get through it, like we always had before. But as time wore on, her silence grew louder. I wasn't blind to it. I could feel her pulling away, a subtle shift in the way she looked at me, a hesitation in her voice when she spoke. But I couldn't understand why. I was still the same man I had been when we first met, the man who had vowed to love her, to cherish her. I worked hard, tried to be the partner she needed. But there were moments, like in the middle of the night, when I could see her tossing and turning in bed, when I'd ask if something was wrong and she'd just say, "I'm fine." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust that everything was okay. The last few months before the phone call were the hardest. Sarah had started staying out late more frequently, saying she had work to catch up on. I didn't question it at first. After all, we both had demanding jobs. But it was the little things that started to slip through the cracks. Things like her phone always being face down when she left it on the table, her quick exits from the room when I picked up a call, and the way her eyes darted nervously when I asked her about her day. My gut twisted every time, but I couldn't bring myself to confront her. I was afraid of what I might find. The last time we went out together, just the two of us, she seemed different, detached, distant in a way I hadn't seen before. We had dinner at a small bistro, the kind of place we used to frequent when we first started dating. I tried to keep the conversation light, asking her about her day, trying to get her to open up. But her answers were short, like she wasn't really listening. I caught her staring off into space a few times, and when I asked if everything was okay, she just smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I knew then that something was wrong, something I couldn't fix. I remember feeling so helpless, so out of touch with the woman I once knew. I spent the next few days in a kind of limbo, unsure of what to say or do. It was as if the distance between us had become too wide to bridge. Every attempt to connect only seemed to push her further away. And then, the call came. When the phone rang that morning, I wasn't expecting it. Not like this. When Sarah told me she wanted a divorce, it felt like the ground had just been ripped out from under me. My hands shook as I listened to her cold, emotionless voice. How had we gotten here? What had I missed? I didn't want to believe it. I kept thinking that this couldn't be the end. We had built a life together. We had shared dreams. We had memories. But now everything was falling apart. I tried calling her back. I texted her. But there was no answer. There was no explanation, no reason for her sudden decision. I couldn't understand it. Why had she gone so far? And why had she involved the lawyer? And now, here I was, sitting across from Mr. Grayson, with no clearer idea of what was going on than when I first picked up the phone that morning. He had been shaking when I walked into the room. Why? What did he know that I didn't? But I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer the man who was content to wait for answers. I needed to know the truth, and I was willing to do whatever it took to uncover it. I left Mr. Grayson's office with more questions than answers. His reaction, it haunted me. His unease was something I couldn't shake. I knew he was hiding something about Sarah, something that had made him react the way he did. The shaking, the panic, it wasn't just nerves. There was a reason, and I was determined to find it. The drive home was a blur. My mind was racing, shifting through every memory, every conversation, every detail that might hold a clue. It all felt like a puzzle, one that I was trying to piece together in the dark, one that wouldn't fit no matter how hard I tried. I couldn't stop thinking about the lawyer. What did he know that I didn't? As soon as I walked through the door, I knew I couldn't just sit back and wait for Sarah to explain. There had been too many signs that I had ignored. The secrecy with her phone, the late nights, the way she seemed distant when she was right next to me. All of it pointed to something I couldn't fathom, but it was there, undeniable, lurking in the space between us. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. Get a grip, I told myself. You need to think clearly. I grabbed my phone and dialed the only number I could think of. Alex. He was my best friend. The one person who knew everything about me, everything about Sarah and me. We'd been through everything together. Heartbreaks, celebrations, the ups and downs of life. He was the one who had always been there, like a brother. Or at least, that's how I saw him. When the call went to voicemail, I didn't hesitate. I left a message, but it wasn't just casual. I needed answers, and I needed them now. Alex, it's David. I don't know what's going on, but I need you to call me back. I need to know where Sarah is. Something's wrong. She's pushing me away, and I think you know why. Call me as soon as you get this. I hung up and immediately regretted it. What if he didn't call me back? What if he didn't even care? The doubt crept in, but I shook it off. I wasn't going to sit around and wait. I needed to find the truth myself. The first thing I did was search her room. I knew it was a violation of privacy, but the urgency outweighed any guilt I might have felt. I had to know what was going on. If she wasn't going to talk to me, then maybe the room would tell me something. I opened the door quietly, as if the very act of searching for answers was somehow wrong. The room was the same as it had always been. The same soft, calming colors. The bed neatly made. The books on the shelf where she'd left them. But the feeling in the room was different. Empty, almost hollow. I started with her desk. Papers, books, a few pictures. Nothing out of place. I moved on to her closet, rifling through her clothes. Then, I spotted something that made my heart skip a beat. A small, leather-bound notebook tucked under a pile of her scarves. I hesitated for only a second before pulling it out. It was a journal. I flipped through the pages quickly, scanning for any hint of what was going on. Most of it was mundane. Daily thoughts, trivial details, shopping lists. But then, near the back, I saw something that stopped me cold. A name. Alex. It wasn't just a casual mention either. The words written were more than a passing note. It was a conversation, an intimate one I had never seen before. The ink felt fresh, almost as if it had been written recently. I can't keep doing this, Alex. I don't know what to do anymore. David doesn't understand. I can't hurt him, but I can't stay. Not like this. My hands trembled as I read the words. My best friend. The one person I trusted. And here it was, clear as day. An affair. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow, something that knocked the air from my lungs. My vision blurred. My mouth went dry. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the page. How long had this been going on? How could I have been so blind? But the more I thought about it, the more everything started to make sense. Sarah had been pulling away. She had been distant, even more so recently. And Alex, my best friend, had been the one she'd turned to. I felt sick to my stomach. I couldn't sit with it any longer. I had to confront him. I didn't care how I did it. The rage was bubbling inside me, threatening to overflow. I needed answers, and I was going to get them. I grabbed my coat and left the house. I didn't know where Alex was, but I knew where he'd be. His apartment was only a few miles away, tucked on the edge of the city. It was the kind of place he could disappear into, the kind of place he could hide his secrets. The drive there was a blur. I wasn't thinking about the road or the traffic. I wasn't thinking about anything except the betrayal. When I reached his building, I parked quickly and headed inside. My heart was pounding in my chest, my hands shaking with the anger that had built up over the past few hours. The hallway was eerily quiet as I made my way to his apartment. I knocked once. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Nothing. I didn't wait any longer. I reached for the doorknob and turned it. The door wasn't locked. It opened with a quiet creak. I stepped inside. The apartment was dark, only a dim light coming from the kitchen. The place was a mess, as it always had been. Clothes strewn across the floor, pizza boxes piled in the corner. But none of that mattered. What mattered was Alex. I didn't see him at first, but then I heard it, a muffled sound from the bedroom. My eyes narrowed. I moved toward it, each step heavier than the last. And then I saw him. Alex was sitting on the bed, his back to me, his face in his hands. He looked up at the sound of my footsteps, and for a second, his face was full of confusion. But then it quickly turned into something else. Fear. David, he said, his voice trembling. Don't. I spoke through clenched teeth, my voice low, dangerous. I know everything. I saw it. I saw your name in her journal. His face went pale. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. I want you to explain, I said, my voice cold, cutting through the silence. Now. Alex's eyes darted around the room, desperately looking for something, anything, to say. But there was nothing. His hands trembled slightly, and his lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. He looked like a man caught in the act, and for a moment, I almost felt bad for him. But the anger inside me was too much, too overwhelming for pity. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. My steps were slow, deliberate, each one punctuating the deep rage building in my chest. He swallowed hard, his breath shaky, and I could see the guilt written all over his face. Did you think I wouldn't find out? I asked, the words leaving my mouth like venom. Did you think I'd just let this go? Alex's gaze dropped to the floor, as if he couldn't bear to meet my eyes. The silence stretched between us like a thick, suffocating fog. The weight of the truth hung in the air, pressing down on both of us. I never meant for it to happen, Alex muttered finally, his voice barely audible, the words laced with regret. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I never wanted to hurt you, David. The words felt hollow. I didn't want to hear any of it. I didn't want his apologies, his excuses, his weak explanations. Every sentence that left his mouth made the knot in my stomach tighten more. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I was standing here, broken and betrayed, and he was telling me it wasn't supposed to happen? How naive was he to think that the damage wasn't already done? No, I said, shaking my head, trying to keep my voice steady. You don't get to say that. You don't get to tell me you didn't want to hurt me. You hurt me the second you decided to lie, the second you decided to betray me, to take what was mine. His face twisted with guilt and sorrow, but I could see the unease in his eyes, the fear. Not of me, but of what he had done. I wasn't the same person who had called him a friend for years. I wasn't the same person who trusted him with my secrets, my life. I was someone different now, someone who had been broken open, shattered by the weight of this betrayal. I should have never come here, Alex said, almost pleading, his voice rising with panic. David, please, I didn't want it to go this far. But it just happened. We got close. Sarah, she needed someone. She was so distant from you, and I was there for her. It just spiraled, man. I didn't mean to. Spiraled? I cut him off, my voice rising in anger. You think this was some accident? You think this just happened? You slept with my wife. You betrayed me. That's not a mistake, Alex. That's a choice. A damn choice you made. He flinched at the words, but I couldn't stop myself. I was shaking now, not from fear, but from fury. All the years of friendship, the late-night talks, the promises to always have each other's backs, it all felt like a lie, a joke, and I was the punchline. I don't know what's worse, I continued, voice low and dangerous. The fact that you did this behind my back, or the fact that you're standing here, looking at me, and still acting like this is something I'm supposed to forgive. Like we can just go back to how things were. Well, newsflash, Alex, we can't. Alex seemed to shrink under my words, his face reddening as he opened his mouth to respond, but I held up a hand to stop him. No, don't. Just don't. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear your excuses anymore. I want the truth. And I want you to look me in the eye and tell me why. Why did you do this? What was going through your mind when you kissed her? When you slept with her? He closed his eyes, the shame too much to bear. When he spoke again, it was a mere whisper. She was lonely. She told me that you changed, that you weren't the same man she married. She said you stopped loving her. She said she needed someone who could see her, who could feel her. I took a step back, the weight of his words hitting me like a punch to the gut. The truth of it all sunk in. It wasn't just the affair. It was everything that had led up to it. The cracks I hadn't seen. The isolation Sarah had been feeling. The distance I hadn't noticed. She had confided in him. And somewhere along the way, she had stopped seeing me as the man who loved her. She had stopped seeing me as the person who saw her, as her partner, her equal. I felt a sudden rush of cold, a deep chill that spread through me. It wasn't just about what Alex had done. It was about what I had failed to do. I had ignored the signs. I had let her slip away, convinced that the love we had was enough to keep us together. But it wasn't. Not when I wasn't paying attention. Not when I wasn't present. I'm sorry, David, Alex said, his voice breaking, a tear finally slipping down his cheek. I really am. I didn't want to hurt you. I never wanted it to be like this. The sincerity in his voice made my stomach churn. But I couldn't forgive him. Not now, not after everything. He had crossed a line. We had crossed a line. And there was no going back from it. Sorry doesn't fix this, I muttered, my voice barely above a whisper. My anger wasn't gone, but it had been replaced by something worse, something colder. You've broken something that can't be repaired, and you've done it to both of us. I turned and walked away from him, each step heavier than the last. I wasn't sure what was worse, the betrayal itself, or the realization that I had allowed it to happen. As I reached the door, I paused, my hand on the doorknob. I could hear Alex behind me, sniffling, his voice calling out, but I couldn't turn back. I couldn't face him anymore. And I couldn't face Sarah, not yet. I don't ever want to see you again, I said, my voice quiet, final. You've lost that right. Both of you. With that, I stepped out into the hallway, the door closing behind me with a soft click. The weight of the moment hung in the air like smoke, and as I made my way down the stairs, I realized that this was the end of everything I had known. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that I couldn't let the past define me any longer. I had to move on. I had to find a way to reclaim what was mine. The city streets blurred around me as I walked aimlessly, my thoughts as fractured as the ground beneath my feet. I wasn't sure where I was going. I wasn't sure about anything anymore. I just confronted Alex, and the weight of it all. His betrayal, the years of friendship shattered, the love I thought I had with Sarah, had left me hollow. I wanted to scream, to tear everything down, to let the anger consume me. But instead, I just kept walking, hoping the movement would somehow take me somewhere, anywhere, away from the suffocating mess inside me. The cool night air hit me like a slap in the face, sharp and unforgiving. My eyes burned from the tears I hadn't allowed to fall. Not yet. Not when there was still so much unresolved. But I couldn't stop the ache, the hollow feeling in my chest that gnawed away at me, deeper with each step I took. It wasn't just the betrayal anymore. It wasn't just about Alex or Sarah. It was everything. My marriage, my trust, my entire sense of self. All of it had been shattered in a matter of days. I had built my life on a lie, and now I had to face the wreckage. I found myself outside a small park, the kind of place Sarah and I used to visit. It was quiet here, the only sound the rustling of leaves in the trees, a reminder of the peace we once had. I sank down onto a bench, rubbing my face, trying to gather my thoughts, but nothing made sense. The anger still simmered beneath the surface, but I was starting to feel something else, something that had been buried beneath the pain. What now? My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me from my thoughts. I pulled it out, half expecting to see another message from Alex, apologizing or begging me to forgive him. But it wasn't Alex. It was Sarah. "We need to talk." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Part of me wanted to text her back, demanding answers, pushing her to explain everything. But another part of me, the part that had finally started to see the truth, knew that the words weren't enough anymore. Talking wasn't going to fix this, not when the trust had been broken beyond repair. Still, I couldn't bring myself to ignore her. I owed it to myself to at least hear her out. I typed a quick response. "I'm done talking. I don't need any more lies. You made your choice." The message felt final, and in that moment, it was. I knew I couldn't continue living in the shadow of what we had been, what we used to be. There was nothing left for me to salvage from that wreckage. I needed to move forward. I needed to rebuild. But as I sat there, the cold night creeping in, I realized something else. It wasn't just Sarah and Alex who had betrayed me. It was me too. I had allowed myself to be so blind, so consumed with the idea of a perfect life, that I had ignored everything around me. I had ignored Sarah's pain, her silent pleas for help. I had been so wrapped up in my own world, in my work, in everything else, that I had failed her. And in doing so, I had failed myself. I closed my eyes, letting the realization settle in. It wasn't enough to just blame them. I had to take responsibility for my own role in this mess. The relationship had been unhealthy, yes, but I had been just as much a part of the problem as anyone else. When I opened my eyes, the world felt different. Not better, not fixed, but different. There was a clarity now that hadn't been there before. I couldn't change the past. I couldn't undo the mistakes I'd made, the hurt I'd caused, or the trust one had lost. But I could change the future, and that was something no one could take from me. I stood up from the bench, the weight of the moment pressing on me, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't about getting back at Sarah or Alex anymore. It wasn't about revenge. It was about me, about finding my own way, about reclaiming my life, my peace, and my strength. The next few days were a blur, a whirlwind of emotions. I didn't sleep much. I didn't eat much. I felt like I was floating through my days, my mind constantly racing. But slowly, I began to rebuild. I spent time with friends I had neglected, reconnecting with the people who had always been there for me. I threw myself into my work again, not as a distraction, but as a way to prove to myself that I could stand on my own. I started going to the gym, pushing myself physically in ways I hadn't before. I didn't do it to look better, though. I did it to feel better, to feel in control of something in my life again. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, I began to heal. It wasn't quick, and it wasn't easy, but it was progress. The anger began to subside. The pain still lingered, but it wasn't all-consuming anymore. I had moments of clarity, moments of peace. I learned how to be okay with being alone. I learned how to trust myself again. And then, one afternoon, as I was walking through the park, I ran into someone unexpected. It was Maggie, a friend of mine from years ago. We hadn't spoken in ages, but when she saw me, she didn't hesitate to walk over. She was different than I remembered, more confident, more sure of herself. And yet, there was a kindness in her eyes that made me pause. We talked for hours, catching up, reminiscing about the old days. She didn't know the details of what had happened with Sarah and Alex, but she listened. She didn't judge me. She didn't pity me. She just listened. And in that moment, I realized something else. I didn't need someone to fix me. I didn't need someone to tell me everything would be okay. I just needed someone who cared, someone who saw me for who I really was. Maggie gave me a glimpse of something I hadn't allowed myself to see for a long time. Possibility. The possibility of a life beyond the one I had been trapped in. The possibility of joy again. And for the first time in months, I smiled. A real smile. Not one fueled by anger or bitterness, but one fueled by the belief that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. That was the turning point. That was the moment I started to rebuild. And as the weeks turned into months, I began to feel whole again. Not because I was perfect, or because everything was fixed, but because I had learned to let go of what was never meant for me, and I had learned to hold on to the things that truly mattered. Life didn't always go the way I expected. It didn't always turn out the way I wanted. But it was mine, and I would make it count.